Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today I'm starting a new class series where I'm essentially just going to give a few tips and tricks on how to boost your DPS. So if you want higher passes and everything like that, then this is the video to watch. Today I'm going to be starting with my main class, the Shadow Priest. Now I want to dive into the video straight away. I want the videos to be fairly quick. I think the first fundamental, most important lesson for a Shadow Priest to learn is the concept of snapshotting your dots. What you're essentially trying to do here is buff your dots of extra damage for longer periods of time. If you apply a dot like Shadow Word Pain or Vampiric Touch, when your trinket buff is 1 second from falling off, it will still think that that dot is buffed with the extra damage, so it will continue to deal the extra buff damage for the duration of the dot. So it is normally always worth refreshing your dots, particularly if it's going to proc with your on-use trinket, but also a trinket like Eye of Magfarodon or your Spell Strike, Spell Power spell bonus, or if all three of those proc at the same time, then yeah, it's definitely worth refreshing your dots. But you're only going to really refresh the dots if the dots need refreshing anyway, like within a few seconds of them falling off. You aren't going to like instantly recast one of your dots the second that something procs, because then you're just kind of wasting a global and will drop DPS because you're not using those globals on stuff like Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death. What I'd recommend for you to do is set up Tell Me When and Bartender like this. So what we have here is, this is my buff for the Blessing of the Silver Crescent, and then this is another trinket buff that I have, and then what I have is I have a macro, as I will show you now, that's basically displaying my trinkets. It's just use 13 and then use 14. So what this does is it just tracks when my trinkets are going to become available again, then this just tracks the duration of the buff. So as you can see, I've got my dots rolling up now, and Icon of the Silver Crescent is about to fall off. It is obviously much better to have like text on Tell Me When as well, and then I just refresh my dots just before it falls off. It's also important to note that the exact same principle applies for Shadow Fiend. When you pop Shadow Fiend, when you have more spell power, it will deal more damage, and the same goes for when somebody pops Heroism. It's normally always best, in my experience, to pop Shadow Fiend during Heroism, trying to optimise the damage that the Shadow Fiend does, because the amount of damage it does during a Bloodlust is just insane. And obviously in an ideal world, it's best to pop Shadow Fiend with your trinket pop and Heroism both at the same time. And if you don't really care about mana that much, sometimes you can just time it when you know that Bloodlust is going to be popped, and therefore you are just basically using Shadow Fiend for DPS purposes rather than getting the mana back, and you can use it on full mana, like for instance at the opening of a fight, providing if you're at a point where your raid is killing, the raid boss so quickly that mana isn't an issue. Because if you're still low geared and your raid is low geared, then it's best to use Shadow Fiend where it's going to provide the maximum amount of mana regeneration back to you, because obviously if you are losing mana and going lower mana, well, you can't cast spells, and then you have to start wanding, which is a huge DPS loss. So the next big DPS trick to teach you is Mind Flay clipping. As you can see, when I cast Mind Flay here, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to let 2 ticks go off. And as you can see by this cast bar, you can see precisely when the actual ticks are going off. So I'm going to cast either Mind Blast or Shadow Word Death after the second tick. I'm going to clip it. I'm not going to bother waiting around for the third tick, because that will be a DPS crease, but only if you have Mind Blast or Shadow Word Death available. In the description of this video, I will give you a weak or a cast bar, basically the one I'm using in this video. You don't have to have it this big. I'm just having it big because I've got a big monitor and I want it, very visible on the video. You can get it much smaller than this if you want. The next important trick is dots spreading. You can only do this on particular fights. For instance, right now you can use it on High King Mulgar, you can use it on Magfarodon, and then there will be a number of situations in tier 5 where you can do this too. Basically, if an add or anything like that is going to survive longer than 20 seconds, it's worth applying both of your dots to that target. And this is probably one of the best ways that you can really top the meters as a Shadow Priest. In fact, if you can't dot spread, you're probably never going to top the meters, if I'm honest, if you're at least with fairly competent warlocks and hunters. But if there are multiple enemies on particular fights, then you have a chance of out DPSing those classes. Especially if the enemies that we're talking about are actually spread out, where warlocks can't take advantage of Seed of Corruption and hunters can't take advantage of multi-shot. It's obviously important to note that when you are spreading your dots, you will be burning a lot more mana, so be aware of that. Always have your mana potions and always get ready to pop your Shadow Fiend. You should always be using a mana potion when you're at roughly about 75% mana, because that means you can get more and more mana potions used in a single fight. Next, I quickly want to talk about the wand. Now, I actually do go for one specialization talent in the discipline tree for a particular reason. In certain circumstances, you will actually have to use your wand because you've either been silenced or you just physically can't cast a spell. Like for instance on Gruul's Lair, you do get silenced, so squeezing in like a couple of wand ticks is a slight DPS increase. And the same goes on Magvaradons, when I think it's during Blast Nova when you're getting knocked back, you can squeeze in wand ticks, whereas you can't really do Mind Flay or Mind Blast or anything like that, because you can only do instant cast abilities during that moment of damage. Also on Magvaradon's Lair, as you can see by the background footage, I always recommend to put your back up against a wall like I am doing here, so when you do get affected by the Blast Nova, you basically don't get knocked back into Timbuktu and have to run back to the boss. But anyway guys, I'm going to end the video there. If you've got any more tips to recommend, then please obviously leave that in the comment section and let me know what class you want to see next in this video series. My name is MetaGoblin. To my next video, ciao.